Hello, this is Everyday Buddha. This is Eddie Matsumoto, and we have Todd Allen as my guest today. And so this is a series of interview in which I interview people who are like everyday Buddha, who have been a seeker or somebody who has experience in awakening, well, whatever you call it, satori, awareness, different names to it. But I just interview my friends or friends' friend who have experience in it and want to share their journey and stories. And Todd, whom I just met 15 years ago, feels that way, but 15 minutes ago. But somebody who has been a spiritual seeker as long as he can remember, in his words, but didn't have any framework until in his 20s. But then he, since then, found some path, and he now devotes his life to self-improvement and also spread love to people around him into the world. And he is planning podcast with his friends, who is also my friends, to especially after this COVID pandemic, we really need to spread compassion and love to the world. So that is his mission, and I'm so excited to talk to him about his journey. So welcome, Todd. Nice to have you.
Thanks, Eddie. It's great to be here.
Okay, yeah, it's kind of fun to have this Freudian slip. Like, I've known him for 15 years. So, anyways, I would love to, hear about your journey. So, go ahead.
Yeah, my journey, as I mentioned to you, I can remember being, probably 6, 7, 8 years old, and I can remember standing in the backyard of the house I lived in and staring up at the stars and just wondering, wow, I just feel so. I guess my thought was I'd learned about solar systems, and if every one of those suns up there had 8 or 9 planets floating around it, boy, I feel so infinitesimally small here, And I remember just having the thought about, what are we all doing here? What does this all mean? How does it to have a birth here? These words that I picked up later, to be able to have the opportunity of a birth, in this place and this time. What is it I'm doing here? And so I had that throughout my childhood, and then I feel that also led to a real longing that was never fully realized as a child. Never, I remember seeking answers from adults and mentors, but never really and asking about the purpose of life, and never really hearing an answer that satisfied me. And so that, I think led to some angst, when I look back now, and some anxiety that developed early on. It does also led to real self-awareness and self-discovery through that awareness process. And then it wasn't until I got it. Well, I feel that also led me into a path in politics in my late teens and early 20s. Again, looking to, by that time, I knew, or I had a sense, that I can articulate now, that I'd come here to do big things. And I think a lot of us who are on this path can connect with that type of feeling. And that through that political experience was a wonderful experience. But again, I left that experience in my early 20s just feeling a bit jaded by it, coming across a lot of people who felt very entitled, making decisions without a lot of transparency. That just, there was part of me that at times I loved that power rush, but I really didn't, in the heart space, it still felt empty. And so I left that path in my early 20s. And then in my late 20s, I found, I was working a corporate job in sales, and I really wasn't feeling very fulfilled. I was in a relationship with my fiance that wasn't very fulfilling for either one of us. We'd moved through that just because things felt like the next natural progression, rather than having that feel that, I really felt that this was my heart's longing to continue on this path with this person. So again, another countless stories in that about self-awareness and self-discovery. And then, which led to our breakup around the time I was 30. And I was also an alcoholic at that time, smoking a lot of cannabis. really feeling disconnected and a bit of, in a bit of a victim space. Wasn't in that space of being a creator, was more in that victim role. And so as I came out of that relationship, I found my positivity coming back, that being something I remembered having before, and a real deeper sense of it. And I wanted to explore that a little bit more. And so one day I moved back in with my parents for a little bit, and there was a college in our town, and there was always a boarder that was at my parents' place. So he was watching TV one night, and I was there with him, and he was flipping through channels, and all of a sudden I saw you. I came to know as Wayne Dyer was on a PBS station doing a talk, and I can't remember what it was at that time, but what I heard him say, or what connected, was he was talking about that we all know in our own heart what is right and wrong. We don't need that to be told what that is. We need to be encouraged to go to that place within that already knows that. And I had this real aha moment of, wow, like these are things I've considered for so long, and finally here's someone actually talking about these things. And so that led me into, getting a couple of his books, and, reading about the power of meditation. And, as they say, when the student is ready, the teacher appears. And there was something in me at that moment that just clicked to say, I could take an extra 20 minutes a day and start to sit every morning. And, I began to do that, and I felt I was able to drop into a place of awareness pretty quickly and feel very connected with the spirit realm. Intuition starting to arise in that space. And so, as we know on our spiritual journey, as we move along, other opportunities seemingly come out of nowhere. And, I was invited to go to a Reiki share, actually with someone who had been my high school phys ed teacher and his wife. So it was an interesting reconnection. And so that led me on the path of healing. I received some Reiki, and then ended up going through and doing the 3 Reiki levels myself. And that was really amazing, just to open up this space of healing within me that I feel Reiki is an amazing gift to the healers that we already are, and maybe refine or point us in our directions a little bit more coherently in the ways that we can flow that and exercise that and share it with the world. So that I went along that path for a time. And that's really been a basis for, I still do Reiki treatments. There's been other healing modalities that have come along the way, but Reiki's been a base for that. And what I've learned, that's also then led me to, I worked with some Peruvian shamans who would come up to a friend of mine's farm once a year, do some courses with them. Began getting heavily into, through Wayne Dyer, getting into Ram Dass, getting into Alan Watts. And always that's still, Ram Dass and Alan Watts are still my go-tos. I also have a carpentry business, in my worldly affairs. And so, often, as today I was listening to Ram Dass all day as I was working. And so those are great centering tools, just listening to that wisdom that's coming through all that, as much as possible, because I'm always hearing different things. But anyhow, to back up a little bit, I guess I was working with those Peruvian shamans. There was also a local indigenous reserve here where I would start going to some sweat lodges, just interested, following, some getting involved in some Buddhist circles, some Hindu circles, trying to get a sense of all of these different methodologies of spirituality. And, for me, it really came to a place of where do they all meet? For me, it was very much that these are all expressions of the one essence. And so how do those all come together, and what do they all share in common, rather than wars being fought in the name of God? So many people taking different viewpoints on what we call God or source or universe, and so much divisiveness. And I really wanted to see, what are the things that bring us all together. And so that started to really fuel my path, my desires in what I wish to share with the world. And it's eventually, coalesced down to, there's been lapses where I've been more involved with spiritual things, spiritual groups. The last 3 years we moved and we built our own house, And that's been an amazing, rewarding experience, and so much healing that has gone on emotionally, energetically through that process. Yet also I drifted away from doing any classes, for myself, or also leading any classes. So it feels like the last year or so, I've really been pointed back into what next, and feeling like that there is that void there in my life, and wishing to share. And so it came up at the start of COVID. I was just sharing a couple nights a week. I would just put out a Zoom link on Facebook for people to get together, to meditate together, do a loving kindness meditation for our world, and just checking in with people to see where they're at. Because as I mentioned to you, and as we were chatting before, that I feel there has been a huge shift in the world, and in the amount of uncertainty that we have had in the world in the last 18 months. And I feel that as a result, there's a collective trauma, that we've all sustained. And, that the work around trauma is something has interested me for the last few years. The work of Dr. Gabor Mate. I don't know if you're familiar with him. He was on his work around trauma, and that being, the root of all addiction. And as I mentioned, someone who has had challenges with addiction, starting to look at what are those root traumas that have been there. And so that's unearthed a great deal in myself, as I've, I continue to clear. I believe that, the work for all of us doesn't stop until we shuffle off this mortal coil, that we're always continually working on ourselves. And, I like to say we're all a work in progress. And yet it comes from I believe that it's extremely important that we are all accountable for everything that exists in our lives. And, that has been probably one of the biggest challenges as a spiritual teaching for me, coming to accept that I have chosen on some level everything that has come into my experience, even those things that Todd doesn't want to accept and wants to be able to shift blame onto someone else or some other situation. That to me, the process has been one of just recognizing more of those things, recognizing the trauma that exists within me and others close to me, and also all of us in the world. And so that has really led to this new podcast endeavor with our mutual friend Gary, that we've been chatting about for a month or so, and are starting to do some recordings about, and just to hone our craft with it as well, and getting used to speaking, and also for Gary and I being succinct as well. Gary and I could talk for hours and hours about all things spiritual, yet, we're really endeavoring to bring that down to a concise, succinct 40 minutes, so that it's something that feels accessible for people to listen to, and just to share about what are ways that we have endeavored to share love in the world, and what are ways that sometimes we learn something about that experience that it was about a huge learning for us, maybe not necessarily our altruistic vision of sharing love with the world. So, trying to share stories that, can often be self-deprecating. I feel from being around so much Ram Dass over the last 12, 15 years, that I love that he just shares about his own story, his own foibles, and what awareness that has brought, to him on his own path. And, what's he say? I work on myself as an offering to others. I work on others as an offering to myself. But essentially just continually working on ourselves, as he's sitting with people who are dying, what is that bringing up for himself? What awareness does he have about that? To me, those are the things that I endeavor to look at. What are the things that cause discomfort within me? As I've heard the definition of suffering being, thoughts or feelings that are dissonant with the way things are. And, I look at when my own little mind wants to create these games and pull Todd away from what the reality and the truth of the situation is, that always rests squarely within me. And what can I look at about changing within myself and healing within myself to shift that? And then how does that help me spread more love in the world and be compassionate, mainly, to others and the places that they're at, and exercising non-judgment in that space. And so that's led me into, doing, as well as the Reiki, doing a lot of spiritual counseling with people as well, and just talking about where things are at. And through that talking process often brings up, such a great vast information about, where people's conditioned beliefs are, and what we hold as true, which might not be true. I love that saying, what gets us into trouble isn't what we don't know, it's what we know for sure that just ain't so. And so that's a bit about my journey and where we are presently, and what we hope to offer to the world. And so, yeah, any questions you have about that? Or
Well, you packed a lot in that your journey, but I really resonate with a lot of things you said, and our journey, Gary's journey, your journey really overlap, and run into same people, same teachers. Dance Wayne Dyer. I've done Reiki, Buddhism, Hinduism, and think what's that stood out for me, not necessarily unique, but some people just get into one dogma, one teaching and stick with it. But you saw the different modalities, and then you are trying to find what's the commonality, what is God in different expressions, and but just come down to uh, compassion, love, knowing the truth, getting through the you said conditions and beliefs, and that gets you in trouble. So trying to see the truth, and then you continue to explore, even if you are in a space, but you still want to help other people to be in the same suffering less, maybe not completely suffering less, but you can reduce the suffering by being able to see what it is, not without your judgment. So a lot of things really resonates with me. So I have to pick, a few things, where to ask questions. But one thing I'm really not familiar with is Peruvian shamanism. So that kind of stood out to me. So I'd like to hear a little bit more about that.
Yeah, I did. I'm certainly not steeped in it.
Mhm.
From what I took from it is what I've seen in in the indigenous culture of North America,
Mhm.
and also in Hawaii, is just a real gratitude and appreciation, and a lot of for the earth, for Mother Earth, for the opportunity of being here in this time and space, and a lot of ceremony around that. And so what I did was an ayahuasca ceremony
Mhm.
with them, which actually, quote unquote, didn't work. They weren't able to bring, I think it was, they didn't bring the vines. They were able to bring the bark and the leaves, and they'd made a brew from that. And I guess they'd had some success in the past with it, bringing in the full ayahuasca experience, connecting with Mother Ayahuasca. And so none of that really happened. It just wasn't, quote unquote, strong enough. But what it did bring about was, I felt a really deep look into myself and my, the conditioned beliefs that I was talking about, the things that I see. They're very much centered in, you know, we are here in a human experience. Sorry about that bit of a noise there. My dog's just walked in here. So, but they're very much centered in, the balance between the spirit and the worldly experience. Excuse me. And so, it was centered around what are things that come up for you in a day-to-day basis, on a day-to-day basis, that are challenging. You feel, one thing for me that I really was able to illuminate at that time was, feeling always like time was a hindrance. I was always working within a certain time frame, feeling that I was always short on time, wanting to rush things. There was always a drive to do things as efficiently as possible with our carpentry business. Yet I would see when there were days that I was leading a workshop in the evening or something, or going to a healing session, I always find that I've often found that I'll drop into that experience 18, 24 hours before, and I'm just more in spirit mode. And I
Mm-hmm.
would find that those days would just click along. We get so much accomplished,
Mm.
and it was really amazing. And so my experience with the ayahuasca really centered me on my hang up around time, and was able to, just with some guidance and counsel of the two shaman that were there, to really look at how, through my upbringing, it was always a lot of focus on, we've got to get this done as quick as possible. My father was a workaholic for years, and it was always, go 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 with his career, and there was always projects at home, at our cottage space at this lake property, and it was always like, oh, this is going to be a short job, and it would take us a half a day or all day. And so things got a little bit disjointed, I feel, in my conditioned beliefs about what time was, that I was always setting unrealistic expectations for what would get completed in a certain amount of in a certain time frame.
Mm-hmm.
And that would ultimately lead to, failure to meet deadlines that I'd set. And just, the stress that can come from that, the stress from, seeing us, wishing us to be in that place of meeting those deadlines, but not really having a reasonable expectation of what that is. So that experience through the Peruvian shaman with very much was a turning point for me to really look at what is coming up in my day-to-day experience. My spiritual experience prior to that had been more of wanting to connect with spirit and be in that place of sharing energy all the time. Yet really realizing it in that work around, I guess it was, I think, around 2012, 2013, that, my my worldly life is also part of this journey, and it needs to be balanced as well. And really looking at what works in my life and what doesn't, and more of a practical way of honing your life, the structure of your life, in a way that works for you, not anyone else. And so that's what I really found those two shamans were really focused upon. And it was surprising for me in a way, really life altering in a way too. And just beautiful, grateful people, grateful for the connection
Mm-hmm.
with other individuals as they came to Canada, grateful to share their wisdom, grateful in their appreciation of Mother Earth and Father Sky as they would share about it.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, that's I guess a lot about it,
Yeah.
bringing it back into my personal experience about it. But to me, that's always where the rubber meets the road. I can learn all of this, I can bring in all of this spiritual wisdom.
Mm-hmm.
I know that I have to apply it on a personal development, scale, if you will. And I like to be a little bit more lax than, say, the Tony Robbins crowd would be about that sort of thing. But I feel that, we have to look at those things. We can be gentle with ourselves, but we can't close our eyes to them. That was my game before that, was hoping I could shove the parts of myself that I didn't like, or my experiences that I didn't like, I could shove those in a nice little neat box, wrap it all up, and shove it in the recesses of my mind, and hope I'd never see it again, Eddie.
Oh.
And I realized that just is not our truth. We have to face what comes up, and so now my approach is one that I've borrowed from Ram Dass, is that, rather than try to not look at those things that bother you about yourself, just set it, visualize it 50 feet away from you, 500 feet away from you. Know that you don't have to deal with it in this present moment, but know that it's there.
Yeah.
And know that when you're ready, you'll deal with it. And so that's been a real game changer for me as well, to be able to bring in that gentle approach to our own personal hangups, our personal stash of stuff, these games our slimy mind wants to play with us, and just gently move through them.
Yeah, well, thank you for sharing. So you have studied different things, and then I think some people, or a lot of people, just use it for their own life situation. But I think there are a few people, more selected people, who just kind of crystallize it. You learn as much as you can for self-improvement, but also you want to pass it on. You just take in and then crystallize it, and then make it your own, or just kind of passing on the wisdom, Ram Dass's wisdom, and then you kind of reach out to other people in your own words, through your human experience, through your human body, and pass it on to other people, so the other people around you who have access to you can benefit from that. So it sounds like that's what you're doing right now. So, with a podcast and your classes. So just maybe regress a little bit, and I like to know, like, any special practices that you're still doing that maybe your go-to, like, when you need to really center before you give a course or whatever. No, is there any way you mentioned meditate 20 minutes meditation, or if that's what you're still doing, or is there any other methods that you like to practice these days?
Yeah, I feel I still, meditation is there for me when I really wish to center, really connect.
Mhm.
I, also use journaling. I'll meditate beforehand and then journal afterwards.
Mhm.
Often, if I have a question that I wish some clarification around or wish an answer around, I'll meditate and then write it. I'll write out that question beforehand and then meditate and then journal on it, and just see very from that space. I find I can more easily go into a window of what is actually coming through rather than Todd editing the words that are coming through.
Mhm.
And did we just break up a little bit there, Eddie?
Yeah, I think we're good. We heard you. Yeah, I heard you.
Okay.
Fine. Mhm.
Okay, excellent. So the journaling, journaling from that, meditating and journaling when I'm seeking answers. Um, for me, what my most continual practice is cultivating a space where I can endeavor to be in constant communion, with Source, with God, on a daily basis. And so, I mean, when I started to endeavor to be in that space, I was probably at about 2% of my day, 2 to 5, maybe on a good day.
Mhm.
Now I hope to be, I see myself more in that 30 to 40%
Mhm.
range. Um, and that's a good practice for me because I can very much get caught, and I have got caught very much in the worldly affairs and what I'm doing on a day-to-day basis, particularly if, you know, a lot of days can look like, fulfilling carpentry tasks for a client, and, I wish to provide value and be in service in a beneficial way. Yet, so I can, as I mentioned before about my hangups around time that existed there before. And so those have still creeped in. So my practice of just really recentering and reconnecting with the energy, really monitoring on a day-to-day basis would be another practice, what the energy flow is like.
Mhm.
Some days it's stronger than others. There's some days when it's more of a sit back and just honor the day. If it's not going to flow, it's more of a time to come inside, and do more administration work and just time connecting with my family. So that, that's a daily practice of mine, is really connecting with where the energy of the day is at. I follow the moon cycles in relation to that as well, as a guide.
Mhm.
And so, yeah, so as far as, the meditation, when I'm requiring centering and if I'm preparing for a course or podcast, I'll usually meditate and then make some notes about what comes through, but that have some reflection time around it. And I get up, I'm an early riser. I love to be up, around 4, between 4 and 5.
Mhm.
And I love that quiet time of the day. As the indigenous cultures say, the veil between worlds is thinner then. And I find when I meditate in those times and I connect with spirit, that the answers that I require just come through, as far as visions come through about, what this day can look like, what are some things that might be coming up within the week, within the month. So using that would be, another practice as well, is just really being in that communion space to know what is coming next, asking from an intuitive space rather than the analytical, rational space. And then that, as I was saying, was just, being in, endeavoring to be in constant communion all day long, and really in with the flow of energy as it exists, being in the place that I feel that is on my authentic path for that day, remembering myself as authentic rather than this worldly taught, that I can sometimes get confused with.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, actually, you might be answering this question already, but it just came to me to ask you, how would you describe God or source? It's sort of, I think you were describing some, but just I'm just curious, how are you experiencing, well, having studied the various modalities and different traditions, and so what is it to you if you were to describe God, source, universe, spirit, however, how do you experience it?
Right. That's a good question. Well, perhaps it'd be best that I'm being led to just, describe first the experience. Is, a place of connection, where I can understand stillness. Really is what it is. When there's not those rational thoughts endeavoring to seek to explain something as it is, just understanding something as it is in that moment of stillness, in that moment of awareness. And that can often look like, those moments that I might ask, please God, show me what direction I require in this moment. I in the carpentry business, often working with sub trades and other people on job sites that may be the least spiritual person that you might encounter, is endeavoring to ride roughshod over other people, on a job site. So asking, what, God, what do I require? Please help me in dealing with this person. And so that always comes back to is a stillness, and the experience of unconditional love, and Todd, it was said to me once, we are all creators. There's the big C, capital C creator, and we're all small c creators. The way we exercise our ability as creators is extending that agape, that unconditional love that flows endlessly from God. And so that's what I experience God as, is just unconditional love, expressing as patience sometimes, as wisdom, as compassion, understanding. And, in those moments where I feel disconnected from a situation or a other person, and I come back and I ask, I'm always led back to that unconditional love. And I've had a couple experiences with many experiences through meditation and realizing that. I had an early experience in my journey where I was on a hallucinogenic drug. Was just that experience of feeling the love from everyone. I was a shared experience with Gary, and we were with a bunch of other people, and we just wanted to love everybody, not in a romantic way, but just what do these people need? There was a party, people were wanting to go to sleep. It was the wee hours of the morning. Gary and I were still very much in this space of all is love and just wishing to help and serve everyone. And so that was a moment where I remember sitting with Gary, watching the sun come up and being in a space of really acknowledging, yes, God is love. God is unconditional love. And that is the force that binds everything together. So that I experience it in many different ways, but if I had to come down to one thing, it would be that stillness. And in that stillness is that agape, that unconditional love.
Yeah, that's beautiful. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you for asking.
So, tell me more about the podcast you're trying to do. So do you have any plan? I don't know how, I've never done podcasts, so I don't know how that works, but do you have like a steady schedule? Like, you're gonna try to do that once a week, or who you're going to invite, what you're going to talk about, and where can we find it? That type of thing.
Sure. Yeah, we'll be putting it out on social media. We're planning on doing it once a week, recording once a week. Probably having, every second or third podcast be a guest, that we can interview about their experiences with spreading love in the world and what it has brought up about themselves in doing so. So your name has come up, Eddie. I know Gary says we got to have Eddie on, and there's many other friends I've got. Gary's mentioned some others as well. So having some interviews on there, so it's not just people listening to Todd and Gary talk all the time, but it's called the Spread the Love podcast, and it'll be on all we're using. I'm a bit new to the technology myself, so we're figuring that out as well. But there's from what I can tell, a great platform called Anchor that is through Spotify that will list it onto all the individual podcast sites, the Apple, Spotify. I can't remember the others right now, but I think there's about 5 or 6 of them. So look for that within the next month. We're just, as I mentioned, honing the craft, so to speak, and really endeavoring for Todd and Gary to be succinct rather than long-winded. And all about our experiences spreading love, other people's experience spreading love, so that we can start to talk more openly about what that looks like and what ways people like to have love shared with them. What are ways that we can extend compassion, learn from each other in the process, and be able to share some fun stories. And Gary and I like to laugh at ourselves, because sometimes our intentions we feel they're so pure, and exalted, but really it's just bringing up some other place where we've been stuck. And I love growing and sharing in that way. And Gary and I, have a lot of love for each other and can take little jabs at each other too. So I think it'll be a fun banter. We get into great discourse. It'll be a fun banter as well. And so we're endeavoring to make it, fun, succinct, and really working on our craft with the podcasting, that long form interview, but a little bit more tighter than, the 2-3 hour long podcasts. Okay. So we wish to be accessible, and I know I can have a block with listening to something if it's over. I've got to be really into something. I'm going to listen to something that's a half an hour, 40 minutes long. So, we wish to have something that's compelling, first off, captivating, and sharing a message about spreading love and ultimately to heal the trauma that exists in the world.
Right. So have you recorded any podcast already? Have you started, or you're still planning?
We did. We recorded one end of last week, and we listened to it together and critiqued it at the beginning of this week. And so we're going to work with that same storyline that we have for that first podcast to hone it a little bit like a script, and hope to share something within the next few weeks.
Great. Yeah, because I have a Facebook page where I post this interview, and I posted the last 7-8 interviews. So we have some, a few hundred followers or likes. So you're welcome to, we can share that on that page too. So people have the similar interest in there. So if you want to, awesome. Share the links, I'll be happy to share that with my people.
That's great. We love that. Thank you, Eddie.
Okay, you're welcome. I think especially, what can beat sharing love, what better topic in the world right now, especially, you're saying that after this trauma, the entire world have gone through 18 months and still going on, still we're not completely out of the woods. So, what better topic than this, and to heal the whole world. So why not share?
Thank you.
Yeah.
I feel that too. And I think we can all, and first off, the reason sharing some stories about ourselves is, cultivating that self-love is so important. How much can we love another if we don't really love ourselves?
Absolutely.
And
Okay. So I think I'm gonna start wrapping up here, and let's see. So either you can share either one of your favorite practices, or you can share last words. Whatever the message you want to share with my audience. So.
Mm. Yeah, I think, well, thank you, Eddie. I appreciate that opportunity. And I think I'd like to share my message would be, to everyone to just exercise, be more gentle with themselves. If there's some hangups that we have, some aspects of ourselves that we don't like, what are ways that we can be more gentle with ourselves? And can we focus on, you know, reminding ourselves of one, two, or three things that we love about ourselves, we love about our abilities. And if we can't do that, what's something else that someone else has told us about ourselves that we've honored and we feel is authentic, and remember those moments, because I feel those are great links to up level our vibration and to put us in a space where we can be more loving of ourselves. That
Mhm.
makes us more loving of everyone else, and exercise that compassion first to ourselves and that compassion outwards, that understanding, the wisdom, the acceptance. You know, we I was taught once in a class, that the seven breaths of God are accept, allow, trust, open, release, arrive, joy. Joy being our highest natural state. And so I think when we exercise that gentleness, we accept and we allow what we truly are, then we can trust and open into that space and release and arrive at our highest natural state of joy.
Mhm.
So I wish sharing that and ask everyone to look at themselves and ask how they can be more gentle, because we don't get anywhere by hammering ourselves or putting a great deal of pressure on ourselves.
Yeah,
How can we acknowledge what we truly are and be gentle?
I think that's wonderful. Well, one thing that reminds me is when I started to practice meditation and so on early on, I can't remember where I got that, but some practice to be really aware of yourself when you are negative towards yourself. Just self-talk, some negative thing. Oh, you're stupid. You make a mistake and you say, oh, you're so stupid. Or how could you do that? And how violent we are towards ourselves, so without knowing it, without realizing it. And I think the Buddha said something like, nobody is as brutal as you towards yourself, than to others. So how brutal we are, just to bring that to awareness and then be gentle. Another practice is to make sure that you thank yourself. There's other gratitude exercises. So one is to thank somebody else, not either at the beginning of the day or at the end of the day. Thank somebody else, and then thank yourself for who
Mm.
you are, what you have done. So that's along what you said, just being gentle to yourself and you love yourself. And then, once you can love yourself completely, and then you can kind of share this abundance of love towards others without being violent. You'll be gentle to others too. So thank you for
Yeah,
that wisdom.
yeah. You're
Mhm.
welcome. Thank you.
Mhm.
Thank you,
Okay.
Eddie. We look forward to it.
Okay. Why? Great. Okay. Thank you so much. And well, hopefully we'll have a chance to talk again. We'll visit. So thank you so much for your time today and sharing your journey and your wisdom and your message of sharing love, healing love to everybody. So thank you.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Eddie. I appreciate being on. Blessings and be well.
Mhm. Same to you.